Another month, another digest. And this time we're covering June 2024. So all the stuff that I finished in that month. And the first one of those is Black Lagoon, which is an anime, 29 episodes long, 3 seasons, or I guess 2 seasons and an OVA kind of collection, which spanned February to June. And it spanned, I did this with Kai Entertainment. He was rewatching and I was watching for the first time. And I think it spanned him being in Australia and then in New Zealand and then back to Australia or something. So it took a long time, basically. And if you're interested, go check out the secondary ENT channel. And we have a nice 3-part episode series where we actually talk about the whole show. But generally, my thoughts is a 3 out of 5, okay? I was thinking about giving it a 4, but I think it settles on a 3. My general take is that I think the OVA series at the end, Roberta's Blood Trail, I think that's really good stuff. That'd be like a 4 out of 5, maybe a 5 out of 5. I really like that stuff. The first 2 seasons, I wasn't too much into it. It has a lot of really good stuff, but I don't know, some of it's pretty boring, pretty bland, pretty generic, I would say. Some of the show is so generic in that it kind of like pushes over to becoming more interesting, but I don't know. Generally, it's a mix, okay? At first, I guess one thing that I would say now that I've actually watched the whole show and I can reflect on the whole thing, initially I didn't think it would have as much depth as it did. My big takeaway when I finally watched the final episode, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should go and rewatch those first 2 seasons because there probably is a lot more going on than I initially gave it credit for. Because when you first get into the show, it like I said, it feels so generic. It feels like, okay, we're going to be going on this action, like this guy in Japan is going to go into this rough world and we're going to have action and guns and stuff and it's going to be so cool. And we're going to have the aesthetic of like being really cool, but there's going to be no depth to it. I don't know, there's interesting characters, you know, Ravi, Roberta, Rock, Dutch, the twins, Chang. There's a lot of interesting characters that I think will stick with me. So generally a 3 out of 5. And if you're interested in actual thoughts, then go and watch those videos. Next up, we have something all the way from 1975. One of the oldest things we've talked about in this series. Doctor Who Pyramids of Mars. So this is I wrote TV episode, but I guess technically this is like a 4-part, like, I don't know how they used to release these on TV. I assume like once every day they would probably release like a Doctor Who episode or something. But so this is 4 episodes, each of roughly 25 minutes in length. And I watched it on the 20th of June. And the reason I watched this, I guess, will make much more sense when we talk about Doctor Who next. But yeah, the finale of Doctor Who was basically calling back to this iconic villain that was introduced in this particular series of episodes. So generally, this is a 3 out of 5. So the first thing to say is that this is, I guess in terms of my experience, I've seen I haven't seen all of it, but I've seen all of Doctor Who except for the 11th Doctor. I haven't seen a lot of, I think I've missed like 2 seasons of that Doctor, though I did watch a whole season 13 with the Flux and everything. And I haven't seen much of the classic Who. I've seen the introductory episodes where they go to like the cavemen people or whatever, and there's some resolution with the school teachers and they leave Susan somewhere, I think. Or maybe that's not then, maybe Susan gets left later. I think I've seen the episode where Susan gets left behind, basically. I've seen the Dalek episodes, those were interesting. But I think beyond that, I don't think I've seen anything. So this was, I guess, one of very few collections into my classic Doctor Who era. Oh, Jesus. Sorry, I just got a Java update. Crazy. But the first takeaway is that it's incredibly different from modern Who. It's much slower. And unironically, I did almost fall asleep, I think, in every single one of these episodes. And I don't think they're particularly bad. Like I said, it's a 3 out of 5, but they're just so slow. I think I did watch it quite late, so I was tired, but it does rarely happen where I'm actually legitimately falling asleep watching something. But I don't know, take from that what you will. I don't know. Despite falling asleep, I didn't think they were that boring to be like worthy of falling asleep, but for some reason I did. Literally in every single episode. It was a struggle to get through it, basically. Although I did end up enjoying it, so I don't know what to say there. But anyways, it's slower. The storytelling is much simpler. There's no crazy plot twists it's like really straightforward sci-fi television with some like historical, like anachronistic, like, oh my god, Egyptian gods, and I don't know. It's that kind of storytelling. It's not cinematic at all. Clearly, back in the day, television shows were recorded with an incredibly different budget and ethos and everything. Like, this does not feel as cinematic as anything near any of the modern Doctor Who era. Even the 2005 stuff feels way more cinematic than this. But yeah, production-wise, it's terrible. I mean, for the time, maybe it was okay. But even then, I can't imagine this being good for the time, but maybe it was. I don't know. It's charming either way, okay? The amount of things they can achieve in such a clearly small budget is amazing, you know. It feels like a student film, but it feels like a well-made student film, I guess. So I enjoyed it. And there is one cool effect that they pulled off, which is, I think, the Sutek's messenger, or whatever he is, like the I think the archaeologist guy, like, that got kidnapped at the beginning by Sutek, or killed and taken over by Sutek, whatever. I think they shoot him at some point, and then they show the effect of the shooting being ineffective by having him reverse time. Oh, no, it's not like him. It's like in the production, basically. Let me clarify this for the 2 people out there who care about this. There's an actor, okay? They shoot him with a gun and there's like a puff of smoke. And in order to show that the shot wasn't effective, they actually reverse the shot and the smoke like goes in reverse. And then the guy like pretends to be walking forward, but is actually walking backward, and they reversed the shot and it was sick. So genius, whoever made that decision, I guess, when they were producing this. But, you know, crazy effects on a small budget. You know, you got to improvise. It was really interesting. Anyway, the next overall note here, Sutek was very interesting in this. I liked him a lot. I think the way he speaks is probably the biggest reason that I like him. Not necessarily what he says, although what he says is interesting because he kind of, for a god, or maybe even, I guess in this case, is probably some really evolved species that actually isn't a god, but kind of has the powers of a god. He speaks very technologically, and like he's communicating via like this technological pyramid that they're building, and it just like he seems very of the universe, and he doesn't feel very godlike, I guess, which kind of makes sense if he did evolve from the universe. I guess that was kind of interesting, but that's not necessarily the appeal of him. I think it's just the idea that he's portrayed as like one of the most dangerous and evil villains that the Doctor has ever met, but he speaks so softly and carefully and precisely, and it's just so interesting. And the fact that we never see him emote, or what's even the word? I guess emote is probably the word, where, because he's always wearing a mask, we don't see his face, we just hear this like calm voice that's talking like this. And I really like it, basically. The performance of Sutek is, I think, the biggest appeal. What else? It's also funny how, since he's trapped by Horus, he also comes across as incredibly weak, like unbelievably weaker than he is in the next time we see him, 50 years later or whatever. Like in this, and the one example of this is that the Doctor basically sets off an explosion that is going to destroy the pyramid that's going to like bring him back to Earth. And Sutek like concentrates his mental power to basically stop a single little explosion. That's like, when I say an explosion, it's not that big either. It's like a little, maybe it would blow up like a size of this room or something. But Sutek basically uses his mental power and he's restraining it and he's keeping it in place, and he's like struggling to talk to his minion like while he's doing it, because like, oh, it's requiring all my energy, go deal with it now. And I'm like, oh man, this poor little god, you know, who eventually, and 50 years later when this episode comes out in 2024, he'll be destroying basically every planet that the Doctor has ever visited. And I just Discord notification. But yeah, it's like big downgrade, but really cool. I liked it. All right, pretty funny and cheesy and campy, and all the ways the Doctor Who is great. This was pretty great. So yeah. But beyond that, let's see. I have a few miscellaneous notes. So one is that they made a Mary. Is that right? Can't be Mary, right? But I said Mary Antoinette reference, which I believe is Madame de Pompadour, which is like the fireplace, or the girl in the fireplace episodes. I don't know, some reference there where I'm like, I feel like this like breaks the continuity somehow, or because I think it implied that he had visited her, or maybe not, and I don't know. Anyway, either way, whatever, it was weird. It is also interesting how many parallels, I guess, they have to the current, most recent season of Doctor Who, and the one that I've written in my notes is that I think Sarah Jane, or it might be Sarah Jane, or it might be someone else. I think it would be Sarah Jane, was like, Doctor, how can Sutek be destroying my world if we're in the past and the future, and I'm from the future and my future's like really good and everything. And then so the Doctor's like, let me show you. And they go in to see Sarah Jane's world, which is in the future, and like the world is destroyed and it's apocalyptic and it's like, oh my god. And they do the same thing in the Meister episode, the Devil's Cord, in this later season. I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat. There was also a very small reference to the, what do you call it, in 1666, I think, where there's like a great fire in England or whatever, and they reference it at the end of this episode, and it's like, oh, let's not get blamed for this fire like we got blamed for that other one. And also in the later season of Doctor Who, in the specials, I guess not the later season, but the specials that came out last year, when they go visit Isaac Newton, they're like, I think he mentions this is 1666, and it's like the Doctor or Don is like, oh, don't go to England or something, and it's like, oh, look at this, subtle links here. And there are a few other things like that. I didn't write them all down, but it is kind of interesting how, I don't know, I guess when they were coming up with this season, they probably rewatched this and were like mildly inspired by a few of the subtle details here. The other thing is that, I didn't even mention this, but obviously this is my only and first Tom Baker thing that I've ever seen in Doctor Who, besides I guess the curator when he appears in the 50th anniversary special. But obviously I've heard for a very long time, since I started watching in like 2011 or something, gee, that's crazy, that was like 13 years ago, oh my goodness, that Tom Baker is like a lot of people's favorite Doctor. Like this is one that stands out. This will stand the test of time despite all the 10 Doctors or 8 Doctors I guess beforehand. He's the one from the classic era that everyone's always like, this is the one you need to see. It's really good, it's really good, it's really good. And firstly, he is really good. I liked him a lot. But what was really surprising to me was how angry he was, or like how cranky, I guess is probably the better word. Like he would get upset at Sarah Jane at times. He was also a bit uncaring. Like I remember he pushed like a dead body away, as though he's like, oh, he should have listened to me, I'm pushing him out of the way. And I was like, this is interesting. He is very different from the more modern era of the Doctor, which is very compassionate and kind, and it was very different, and I thought it was interesting. The way Oh, there was also a bit of comedy in this. Okay, I like the way they did it, which is that the villain will be like talking to Sutek, like the actual archaeologist guy, and the doctor and Sarah Jane will walk in, and then he's about to turn around, and they like step back out of the door, and I'm like, this is fun. This is what do you call this? Like physical comedy or whatever. It's great. Then there's the actual death, which I think is really interesting. Which is actually the whole resolution of this episode is interesting. Where firstly you think that the doctor is too late, and Sutek has already escaped the trap. And then the doctor gets in the TARDIS and goes to Earth and is like, don't worry, we still have time. And it's like, how do you have time? And I guess they explain it, which is that this, in order to, basically the TARDIS is like faster than light. And in order to release Sutek, the signal has to go from Mars to Earth so that the relay can be sent to where Sutek is trapped in a pyramid or something, so Sutek can be released. And that signal takes time because it's Mars and it's far away, but the TARDIS like can be back on Earth quicker and can destroy the actual thing that's sending the signal before he gets disabled. So it was sick. Oh no, not that. Sorry, not disabled. This thing that's causing the signal will actually kill Sutek, which is that the Doctor basically tricks Sutek by having him travel into the time corridor, which is going to send him to Earth and release him. But while he's in the time corridor, extend the end of the time corridor, like really far into the future. So Sutek will basically live out the entire rest of his life in that time corridor until he ages to death and he just dies 7,000 years old. So that was cool. I really like the resolution of this episode. But yeah, that's the Pyramids of Mars. 3 out of 5. Kind of interesting. Then we have the actual Doctor Who 2024 Season 1. I guess it's technically like Season 14 or 15 of Doctor Who, but they decided to rebrand it. So this is a TV show. It's 8 episodes long, and I started on the 10th of May and finished on the 21st of June. So this is a 4 out of 5, okay? I was teetering between a 4 out of 5 and a 5 out of 5. If the finale it tied everything together and it was perfect and logical and I loved it so much, I think this would definitely be a 5 out of 5, but a little bit of disappointment in some of the things that happened in the finale. But other than that, really good. 4 out of 5. One of the better seasons of Doctor Who overall. And so a really good return to form. But now let me scroll down to my notes. Overall thoughts. Oh, of course, there we go. Return to form. This felt like basically ever since season 10 of Doctor Who, which was Capaldi's final season, which I wasn't much of a fan of. It felt a bit off to me. And then the stuff from the 11th Doctor that I've seen, which also did not feel it wasn't appealing to me, it didn't feel like Doctor Who to me. This season very much felt like I was watching Doctor Who, and it felt like the type of Doctor Who that I liked. So I was very glad to see it. Basically, this felt like a pre-season 10 Doctor Who, and it was fantastic. Also, I guess this is, when it was airing, there were a lot of other things that I was watching as well, and I still am watching, like The Boys, The Acolyte, My Hero Academia, Mushoku Tensei, a bunch of stuff that I was watching. Of all the things that I was watching, this was the one that I would look forward to the most every week. I thoroughly enjoyed basically every episode, and I would always look forward to the next one. So it always had that on me. So well done, Doctor Who, I guess. The other thing is that this had a very interesting overarching story that I was very invested in. So I think the build up for this season's overarching story with like the Susan triad that is being scattered across the world, and we're seeing it everywhere basically. The Ruby's mother stuff at the beginning set up in the Christmas special, like that whole mystery, and the snow, like whenever Ruby's thinking she's snowing or whatever, and the mother like changing the memory and pointing at the Doctor. All this stuff is unbelievably engaging and very prime for like me. Just is very tantalizing. It's like what is going to be the wrap up to all this? I think this is maybe the best build-up that Doctor Who has ever done for a mystery. I don't think I've ever been this invested. The closest one other than that might be the silence in season 6. That was really well done, I think. But I think this might even be more tantalizing. So I really like this. Another, just before I get to, the downside here, the use of Carol of the Bells, which is like that song that's like Ruby's theme, basically. Whenever we're doing these cool, like overarching mystery elements, it's such a cool song. Every time they used it, I was on the edge of my seat. I'm like, what are they going to show us? Oh my God, I'm so excited. So good choice of song, I guess, for that. And another thing related to this overall arching mystery, now that we have the conclusion to it, which I'll talk about, we're going to get there when we talk about Empire of Death. I think going back, which I have done, and watching the beginning first scene of The Church on Ruby Road, which is the Christmas special where this whole overarching mystery began, it feels much more emotional now when you're like, oh, this is like it's a poor 16-year-old girl coming from like an abusive home, and it's just sad, but also like kind of cool and emotional. And you see the Doctor coming and you hear the monologue, and it's like, no one knew the name of this person until a time traveler came to call, and it's like, oh, this is like cute. So retroactively, just having this mystery go through a whole season, which I wasn't sure if it was. I remember if you go back and look at my December digest, whenever that came out, I did say that maybe we'll never get an answer to Ruby's mother. Maybe it's not a mystery, but it was, and it was interesting, and it makes that, even if the conclusion wasn't perfect, I think just having that element of mystery and having a conclusion kind of makes that first scene stand out more than it initially did. Anyway, but yeah, I guess other than that, the performances also really stood out. Obviously, we have a new doctor who has had a whole season now, and he did a fantastic job. He's up there with, I guess, my other three doctors, which are doctors, I guess. Eccleston doesn't really stand out to me that much. I guess he didn't have that much of a thing to do. But then again, he probably had probably even more episodes than Ncuti Gatwa, I guess is his name. But yeah, he didn't stand out to me. Obviously, David Tennant, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, these are my three doctors. They're all great. I don't know who I can say is the best. They're probably Matt Smith at this point. I think I like him probably the most. But Ncuti Gatwa is up there with them, and I love him. He was fantastic. Then we have Ruby Sunday, played by Millie Gibson, apparently. She's fantastic. I love her. We've got two other standout performances, which I also wrote down, which is Maestro, which basically carried the episode they were in. And that's played by Jinx Monsoon, apparently. They were fantastic. And then we have Mrs. Flood, who I also love their performance, especially in the final scene where they're like, oh, do I even remember the dialogue? It's like, oh, is it going to be a terrible end or something? And the way she said it is just so cool. And basically every scene she's in, it's great. And that's played by Anita Dobson, apparently. So well done to all those 4 people, I guess. Now, this is the big thing about the finale, which is that Doctor Who, basically, he kind of has a tradition every now and then. It's not every time, but quite a few of these finales, they have a 2-part finale where the first part is absolutely fantastic and it's building up and it's great. Then the second part doesn't quite land, okay? And I have a few examples here, okay? We have Dark Water, which is a brilliant build-up of, people, where do they go when they die? And what is the nether sphere, and who is Missy and everything like that. And it's all well built up, and you get the Cybermen reveal. And then you get Death in Heaven, and to me it felt a bit rushed, and you're getting like the unit is involved, and it just felt a bit messy to me, and it didn't quite land at all. Then you've got Heaven Sent, one of the best finales, one of the best episodes in all of Doctor Who, maybe like the second or third best episode ever made. And then you get Hell Bent, which is like, I don't know, the Time Lords are weird, you got some recasting, it feels a bit rushed and small, and they go into the end of the universe again, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't like Hell Bent that much, We got the whole Clara storyline, which is a bit like, I don't know, the end wasn't that great, yeah. Then we have I think the season after that, or maybe 2 seasons after that, whenever it was, we get The World Enough and Time, which is another great, fantastic build-up with the Cybermen reveal, and we get the 2 masters, and it's fantastic. Time dilation, a giant spaceship going away from a black hole or something, really great. And then you get The Doctor Falls, which again felt rushed. It focused on Bill, who I didn't care about, and I don't know, wasn't for me, Now we have, in addition to all those list of, I guess, disappointing finales, we have The Legend of Ruby Sunday, a fantastic build-up, which we'll talk about, and The Empire of Death, which, you know what? It's actually not as bad as any of the ones I listed. It's still a little bit disappointing, just because of how great The Legend of Ruby Sunday was. I still think Empire of Death is generally a pretty good episode, but yeah, it's a little bit disappointing for the build-up. Anyway, I think one of the key differences, I think, is that I think of all of those options, so Death in Heaven, Hellbent, The Doctor Falls, and Empire of Death, I do think Empire of Death probably stands on its own, because it has a lot of interesting elements to it. I still feel the emotions in it, whereas on the other ones, they all don't quite land for me. So I don't know. It's not quite as bad as the other ones, I guess, but still pretty bad. Anyway, so with that out of the way, we got 8 episodes to talk about. Okay, I'm going to go through this quick because, my goodness, this is going to be a long digest if I don't. The first one, episode 1, Space Babies. So generally, I guess I can just rapid go through my thoughts. It's a fun episode. I like the concept. You got like these talking space babies and they're on an automated spaceship, and it was cool. It felt like a soft reboot as well, because you've got a bunch of like, I guess that Disney is probably assuming that a lot of people are going to be watching this for the first time because it's on Disney Plus and it's been refreshed after a big change, all these new actors and sets and blah, blah, blah. It's all different. So they're giving a lot of exposition at the beginning of this episode. Like, who is the Doctor? Who is Ruby? What is the TARDIS? What are the time travel rules here? So there's a lot of soft rebooting stuff, which I liked. It was kind of cool. The one thing I don't like about this episode is basically the grossness. Grossness, if you ever put grossness in anything, it's like something being disgusting, basically. That is the one thing I universally never like it, I don't think. Unless maybe you, as a viewer of mine who has watched all these digests, maybe you can find one point where I said that, oh my god, it's so gross and great. But I don't think I've ever said that. And it's going to be a thing where I talk about twice in this. One for this and one for Mary and Max, which we'll get to eventually in my digest here. But yeah, the gross, like, snot monster bogeyman or boogeyman, whatever, disgusting. And it leaves me with like a sour taste. I'm like, oh, I don't want to rewatch that episode because it's so gross. But other than the grossness, I think it was a really great episode. Then I have a few miscellaneous notes. So the nanny filter, translating the nanny's language into robot speak, was great. Despite being disgusting and gross, and I hate it, the boogeyman design was really fantastic. And you can really, that's another thing I didn't mention, but you can see the budget has clearly gone up in the show since I guess the last time I saw it, which would be like season 13, The Flux. This feels like a big production. VFX look really great. creatures like the bogeyman or boogeyman look fantastic. So yeah. And again, despite how disgusting it is, the idea that the I guess the nose blowing from the babies, which is like an automated thing they do like every day, that being the twist that it's like, oh my god, all the boogers are being sent to become the boogeyman, it was a good fun twist, despite how disgusting it is. Then we have the doctor caring about the boogeyman. Like, I guess, yeah, just generally, I did like this episode a lot, because it's been a while since I watched this, obviously. Probably I watched this in May, 10th of May, probably. Basically, the doctor finds out that, oh my god, this monster I'm so scared of, he's just like one of the kids, and he's scared, and like, he's going to be sucked down into space, and he doesn't know what's going on, and he's confused, and I'm like, oh, he is the only one of his kind. So I was empathizing, and I thought it was really cute how the doctor cared about this, like, boogeyman monster thing. So yeah. Anyway, that's Space Babies. Next up, we have the Devil's Chord. This, again, had a very interesting premise, where you've got the music that is being taken away from the world, so kind of cool. This is also alongside the Giggle, which introduced the toy maker, now we have the second supernatural godlike entity in Maestro. And I think Maestro did carry this episode. Maestro's performance is fantastic. The mix of like playfulness and like anger, I guess, or like the way that Maestro would like scream and like, but then would also like laugh and like be kind of playful, and it was just great. It was fantastic. Like the rapid changes in mood. It was a very scary character. You don't know at what point they're gonna snap and like get angry at you. Love it. Really fantastic. I also, I loved it in the Toy Maker episode, and I loved it in this. I love the abstractness of the power. Like the idea of like taking music away from the world is a really interesting abstract power for a god to have. There's this one scene that I really liked where Maestro brings the TARDIS into this black like stage play kind of void area, and they're playing the piano, and it's really great. Good stuff. What else is there? The TARDIS. I guess the idea of like singing to break the screwdriver, like, because Maestro is all about music, and fighting the Doctor with music. They have a music battle, like in Doctor Strange. Cool. It was really great whenever I see it, so I thought that was great. Another thing this episode does, which was interesting, is that this is probably out of all the episodes this season, this one breaks the fourth wall the most. And there's 3 examples I have. One is that they're probably the coolest, which is that we have like a teaser at the beginning of the episode, and then we cut to the opening. Before the opening, though, Maestro is like playing the piano, and they play the theme, the opening theme is like dun 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 dun, dun, and then it cuts to the opening, and the piano is like at the beginning of it, and it's like, oh my god, Maestro is aware of the fourth wall, and they're playing the opening song. That's sick. We also have the Doctor, who refers to the Doctor's hearing music, and they're like, oh, I thought that was non-diegetic, and it's like, oh my god, that kind of implies that the Doctor can hear the soundtrack of the show, and it's like, ooh, oh my god, breaking the fourth wall. And then obviously this episode also ends with a dance number, and basically everyone in the universe is like dancing, and it's like there's always a twist at the end, and they're like singing a song, and it's like, oh my god, this is so cool. Like it's campy, it's fun, it's well choreographed, fantastic, love it. So yeah, what else? Oh yeah, my only disappointment in this episode, which maybe mirrors the disappointment in the overall season, is the ending of this episode. I have absolutely no idea what happened. Okay, my like the general premise here is that you have the Devil's Chord. I don't know if it's the Devil's Chord, maybe it's another chord, but they have some chord they need to play of songs on a piano so that Maestro can be defeated or like sent away if you play the correct series of notes. And the Doctor's like played like 3 or 4 out of the 6 or 7 notes, and then he like does the wrong note. And it's like, oh my god, he doesn't know what the chord is, and he's not going to win. But then the Beatles come in, or like 2 of the Beatles, maybe one of the Beatles, I don't really remember. And there's like a piano outside the room, and it's like completely separate to where Maestro is, and they just happen to like walk up to the piano and play a note. And then it just like defeats Maestro, and I'm like, what? I don't understand. Like, why did the Beatles suddenly come to this piano? Why did they know the note? Why is this like a Beatles reference that I don't understand? Because I don't know anything about music or the Beatles or history or anything. So I don't know. Completely fell flat for me, that ending. Incredibly disappointing ending. But other than that, it was fantastic. So yeah. Oh, believe it or not, I have 2 other miscellaneous notes for this episode. I said so many classic references this season, and I said Rani or the Rani, Susan, etc. So okay, so a bunch of those. And also when Ruby yells in this episode at some point, it sounded exactly like Hermione from Harry Potter. So take from that what you will, I guess. Next up, we have Boom, which is a Stephen Moffat episode. You know, we love Stephen Moffat here. Okay, probably the best showrunner of Doctor Who. Okay, out of the 4 showrunners or 3 showrunners, I guess we've seen. Now, everyone loves this episode. Okay, I will say this is the weakest of the season, and I have talked about this on stream previously, so I guess I'm repeating myself here. But I have a nice paragraph that I've prepared for Boom. Okay, the concept is fantastic. The Doctor steps on a mine, and the whole episode is figuring out how to get off it. Great. The sci-fi elements are great. You have a wandering ambulance on a battlefield. You have an unaligned artificial intelligence that's triggering a perpetual war. You have a mine that's scanning for life before exploding. And you have a mine that converts a person into the fuel for the explosion. So this is all really cool sci-fi stuff. The Doctor is fantastic. Okay, he's getting emotional and stuff. We love it. The Doctor and Ruby have great interactions. We love that. there's two disappointments in this episode. One is the new characters. All of them felt incredibly empty. I know there's like a female soldier, there's a male soldier who was in love with the female soldier. You have a father and you have a daughter. And the daughter felt like she was way too old to be playing something that felt like it was meant to be a 3-year-old. The father was incredibly stiff. I guess he was an AI, so I guess that makes sense. And the female and male soldier, I did not care about them one bit. Okay, and they were frustrating. Okay, just because of like the same way that you find characters in a horror movie do make frustrating decisions, these characters felt like they were making frustrating decisions. And do I have examples? No, because I watched this a long time ago, but that's what I remember. And beyond the characters, the plot stuff is also a little bit questionable. So I guess this is one of the frustrating decisions. I said the soldier lady shooting the doctor so that he drops the flask is incredibly frustrating. The daughter randomly showing up on the battlefield, crazy. And the daughter thinking that the hologram is her dad and running to him, which, I don't know, it's ridiculous. And I think that even triggered, like, I don't remember what it was, but I think the doctor was like, she was going to like run and hit the doctor or something. And it's like, she's going to explode the planet because of her stupidness. It was really frustrating, basically. But I guess just a positive thing to say about this is that of all the episodes this season, this felt incredibly distinct. It feels like what do you call it? A bottle episode or something? Whenever it's like doctors in a single location, we're following the drama of this single mine. It felt very different. And also, I guess it also felt different in that we opened the episode not focusing on the doctor. Like, I think we followed the male and female soldier as well as the father and the daughter. Like, we opened with that kind of stuff, and it felt very like Utopia, where it's like you're not following it, but when we're in Utopia, when you get to actually inside the protected base of the humans, there's like a whole life going on there. And it's like, we don't really follow anyone besides the little kid who eventually becomes the Toclophane, but it kind of felt like that. It felt like we were watching one of those people living their lives in this like kind of sci-fi like setting. It was really cool. Anyway, miscellaneous notes, little girl, terrible. Dialogue really bad. I said, we'll see her again. Daddy explained. I'm like, oh my God. What else? Explaining the mine is flashing because of capitalism. I thought that was kind of cool because it's like, there is always this trope in fiction where it's like, this is like a mine. You want it to hide away. You don't want it to be obvious. Why is it flashing? And it's like, because of capitalism, they'll sell more mines because it looks cooler to the people buying it. So crazy. They were fun. Oh, yeah, there's also tie-ins to the previous lore, which was cool. The Anglican Marines, as well as the Villain Guard Corporation, which I did not catch, but I read later on that they referred to this back in the Doctor Dances, I think. Kind of cool. There are also some really cool lines. So, now you need proof, which is like when the Doctor is... When I think the Anglican Marine, I think the female soldier is like asking the doctor for proof that I think he's like a Time Lord or something. And he's like, oh, now you need proof. Crazy. There's the we're all dead eventually. Hardly any time we're not dead. Cool. Like it. And then we have the snow thing. Snow isn't snow until it falls. We all melt away in the end, which is basically just another way of saying that like life isn't life without death. Like we need some destination or something to strive for. I guess death is not to strive for, but it gives you like an end goal. So you want to fulfill your life, in the meantime. I don't know. It's kind of cool way of phrasing it, even if I don't necessarily agree with that mentality, but yeah. Anyway, we're getting there, okay? Next up, we have episode 4, 73 Yards. This is one of the best episodes of all of Doctor Who. I love this. It's fantastic. I know a lot of people, for some reason, I guess I can understand. I was going to say for some reason, but it is pretty clear. People don't like that this doesn't make too much sense, or it leaves it very open-ended, and it's very difficult to like wrap your head around like why it would make sense. To me, I like that it doesn't make sense because it is open to interpretation, but it feels like you can make an interpretation that's just out of reach, Just like when Ruby at the end here is reaching out and she's just like, if only I realized this sooner, I'm like, I don't know. It's great. I like this episode. We'll talk about what I like about it, I guess. But the first thing, I guess, is it's a fantastic premise. Okay. So you've got like someone who is always a fixed distance away from you, who's always watching you. And whenever anyone talks to them, they look at you and they scream and they run away. And it's like, cool. That's a really cool sci-fi concept. And they did it really well. And it never got boring. They even have some twists on like, not twists, what do you call it? Like there's development in that regard where initially it's kind of like a source of like anxiety and fear for like Ruby. And eventually it becomes like a source of comfort and familiarity. And she's like cheesing out the window to the woman that's always with her like throughout her entire life. And even at her deathbed, she's like, oh, I was never alone my whole life. I always had the woman. And I think this all ties into what I think makes this episode appealing, but it's great, basically. Cool. And I like how they play with the different relationship that Ruby has with this woman. So yeah, really engaging sci-fi storyline, but with fantastic character stuff for Ruby. So yeah, it's also really well directed. Yeah, I also don't have too many examples for this. I did watch this a while ago, but I have some. When they go into the small bar at the beginning in Wales, where the people are like telling the fake story about Mad Jack, that's really directed well and directed like creepily. And there's like awkward, like, I don't know how to describe shots, but like they're zooming in on someone's face and it's like a low angle and the lighting is like really dark and everything and it looks cool and it's really creepy. So that's a good example, I think, of the directing being great. Excuse me. The shots of the woman in the distance are always really creepy. I liked how they portrayed that. And the one that stands out is like when Ruby is like going down on the train and she's looking out the window and you see like all these streets, and down the street you see the woman, then you go to the next street and the woman's there and it's like, oh, this is a really cool shot. The news broadcast interview with Roger Guilliam looked very authentically like a news broadcast. So however they did that was great. I don't know if they used like the same cameras that were actually on the set of like the BBC or something. I think I remember something vaguely like that in the behind the scenes thing, but whatever they did, it looked authentic. So well done. The creepy scene, right at the end when Ruby's in the hospital, like really old Ruby, and the woman gets very close to her. That's really effectively like horror and creepy. So I like that, the way they directed that, as well as this final POV shot where it's like the hands are coming down and the thing is coming into focus. That's really well directed as well. So generally, and there's like a bunch of really, like I was scrolling through this just to like see like a bunch of shots like this to quickly get some examples, but there was like one where it's just like an insert shot of like aerial view of the waves like crashing against the wall when Ruby goes to visit the TARDIS. Like shots like that just makes this feel so cinematic and well directed, basically, this episode. So I liked it a lot. What else? My next thing is that I love the fake out climax. But what is this? What am I referring to here? Where Ruby... Oh yeah, so basically you think that throughout this entire story, you're like, why is this woman here? What's happening? Why is she here for? And even Ruby, throughout her entire like life until she's like 30 or something, she's just trying to figure out like, why is this woman here? And then she thinks that she has the answer, which is that she has been tasked with using this woman to prevent the Prime Minister from getting nuclear codes so that he can destroy the world. So basically, she's going to be the hero of this world. And what she does is that we get to the climax and she basically stands 73 yards away, which is the premise of this episode, because the woman is always 73 yards away from her and, causes people who talk to the woman to run away in horror. She stands 73 yards away from the Prime Minister and he succumbs to the influence and runs away. And because of that, his campaign is ruined and he never gets the nuclear codes, basically. But then you realize that that's not the conclusion, and the woman doesn't go away, and Ruby thought she found purpose in the curse, but she didn't. And I think that's really interesting because, I guess I should talk about my interpretation at this point, I guess. So, and then we can get back to what I was saying. So the appeal of the episode to me is that it's very open to interpretation. What is the hopeful realization that Ruby makes at the end? My interpretation of the episode is this. So I said, the Doctor basically steps on the Mad Jack fairy circle, I think they called it. So that triggers a curse that then torments Ruby by playing on her feeling of abandonment by her mother. The curse ends when Ruby dies in a hospital, realizing that the woman who had been with her whole life was herself. It's a message of self-acceptance and that there's a certain comfort in loneliness. These final thoughts of realization as she dies are the words that the woman is speaking as she is bound to Ruby's life. She says, "I'm sorry, I took so long and I tried so hard. What else could I do? It took me all these years, all these long years, and look at me. I was so young." I think in this moment, what she's saying is that like she's realized that she doesn't need other people. She's never been alone. She has herself. That's all she needs to be happy. And she wishes that she realized this when she was younger. And she's like looking to herself and she's reaching out and she's like, I wish I could have realized that I was happy with myself and I didn't need to worry about my mother and like, I didn't need to worry about this curse that was sending people away from me because I am enough for myself. And I guess that's my interpretation of what I find so appealing about this. It feels like an open-ended character study of Ruby, which I thought was really cool. But back to what I was saying, I said, the appeal of this fake climax is that then you go back to Ruby basically keeps going on and she thought she found meaning in this curse that otherwise wasn't meaningful. And it ties in, I guess, to the conclusion of this season, which is that Ruby has basically been searching for meaning behind her abandonment. And I guess in this case, the abandonment is like symbolized by this figure that is sending people who speak to her away. And like, it's almost like they look at Ruby, they get a good look at her, and then they realize that they have to abandon her. And it's like, it from Ruby's perspective, it's like, what's wrong with me? And she can't accept that it's just the thing that happened to her. It's that she just happened to be abandoned because of the circumstance of her birth, which is that, you have a 16-year-old girl who was abused by her family and had to give her up for a better life for Ruby. There has to be more than that. It has to be like this curse is making her feel abandoned because her abandonment will have a purpose. It'll make sure that like the nukes don't get set off in London. But no, it's not that at all. It's just purely, it's like there is nothing more to it, I guess, than that. So it was kind of interesting. That's kind of my, it doesn't really make that much sense, but that's my best interpretation I can come up with that I thought was interesting. But other than that, my only other main notes here, I said I love the scenes with older Ruby. So there's two of them. We get one where she's visiting the TARDIS, and she's not that old yet. I think she's maybe in her 70s or something. I don't know, maybe 80s. She says that she never saw her mother again, and she assumes that at this point she must be dead by now. And it's so sad. She's like, no one ever told me. And I'm like, man, it sucks. She says it never snowed again, and she says that she has hope that one day she'll understand why the woman is following her. The doctor taught her to be hopeful. I dare to hope. And I'm like, oh, this is cute. Really cute stuff. And then there's also the older Ruby scene where she's dying in the hospital. And there's a really cute thing where she's like, the nurse is like, you can just turn the lights on by using your voice or something. And Ruby's like, well, that's not new. It was like that when I was younger. And I'm like, oh, that's cute. Like a commentary on technology. Like, I don't even know. What is so cute about that? I don't even know. I hope you can understand, because to me, it's just such a cute thing to have like an old lady who's like, well, that's not new. And like this young person, I don't know. I can't even explain it, but it's very cute. It'll probably come to me after I finish recording this anyway. She says that she could make it snow when she was younger. And to her, obviously, and to us, it has meaning. We're like, oh my God, she could make it snow. But the nurse is like, oh, okay, old lady. It was kind of cute. And then she says like, all my life, everyone has abandoned me, but I haven't been alone for 65 years. And then that's when she makes the realization that, you know, she's had herself. And it's like, oh, that's cute. So yeah, that was... All right, I was going to say that's 73 yards, but I have some miscellaneous notes here. I said the look of hatred and disgust from her mum when she's driving away in the car. Like I said, dang, because true, it was unsettling to see that, because the mother is so loving, you know. Everything we've seen her in is she's got a kind heart, and to see her just look at Ruby with disgust is yeah. Dang, is all I can say. The interaction with the perception filter was an interesting theory that was like brought up by Kate. I thought that was cool. Kind of like a speculative black hole. It's like, what would happen if like two perception filters interacted like that? Kind of cool. Love that they explore the extremes. So the example is that Kate was like, what happens if you're on a plane or on a boat? And Ruby's like, I feel like I might die. And I'm like, oh, okay, I buy that. That's like a good explanation for that. Like covering why you're not like testing it out. And I guess speaking of Kate, I think this is one of the better Kate appearances. I'm not really the biggest fan of Kate. I was actually kind of hoping that she would die when she died in the finale, but obviously that got reversed. In this situation, she kind of feels powerful and in control, and she like has all the knowledge, and which kind of, I guess, and she also feels like a comforting presence where it's like, oh my God, okay, Kate's here. She's going to solve it. She's the head of a unit. She seems in control, blah, 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 which then again makes it even scarier or like disheartening when the cursor even affects her, and she like looks at Ruby with disgust and like walks away, and it's like, oh no, not Kate. So yeah, that was great. Then we get the fantastic montage of Ruby getting older and accepting the woman as part of her life, and she's like cheesing her glass outside the window. That was really great. And also, I guess just generally a miscellaneous note, I thought the actor for Roger William, I thought that was really good. He came across as like very charismatic, and I'm like, I can understand why such an evil person could like come to power, and so that was great. Then we have episode 5, Dot and Bubble. So overall, this was a decently engaging Black Mirror-like sci-fi episode with an all-time fantastic scene at the end with the Doctor experiencing racism. So that obviously this episode was made by that final scene. That final scene is like, it transcends the episode. It's so much better than the rest of the stuff in the episode. But yeah, like it, and there's not really too much to say beyond like the Doctor is black, okay? The first black Doctor we've ever had. He goes to a particular planet where it's a bunch of rich white people, and they see this black Doctor, and they're like, well, we don't want to associate with your kind. We don't want to catch your filth or something is I think what they say. And it's like, man, the Doctor's never experienced something like this, where it's like a terrible, rotten person who doesn't want to be saved, and doesn't want to be saved because of who the Doctor is. And it's just so interesting, and seeing how the Doctor reacts to it, which is like, it's just so... Even in this moment, he's accepting. He's like, think whatever you want, okay? Hate me if you want, but I want to save you. And he still like reaches out, and it's like, so just the fact that he doesn't chastise her in that moment. He like, even in the face of like someone hating everything you are, he's like still reaching out. It's very Doctor-like. I think it's fantastic. And then just the performance of like him laughing and screaming, and he's spitting and stuff, and he's so amazed that like someone like this exists and that he couldn't save her. And it's like, man, fantastic. So that just made the episode. There's not really much else to talk about. The sci-fi was great. I don't know, I like Lindy. She was a great performance. Like the melodramatic, like overacting kind of Mindy. It was great. I think her name was Lindy. Fantastic. What else? Miscellaneous notes. All these people look way older than their actual age. Yeah, at the beginning in their profiles, like their digital profiles, we see that like 21 or something, but the actor is clearly like in their 30s. It was a bit weird. I like the acting by Ruby. The absurdly long number sequence that they have to enter to like get out of the room. That was incredibly stressful and added a lot of tension. I was on the edge of my seat, and I was confident that they were going to get it wrong, but they didn't. So love it. Great. I guess, oh, and even this is, I didn't mention this, but before the racism reveal that we revealed that Lindy is like a big racist who, you know, is not going to go with the Doctor, I think there is enough details that you can have this interpretation, which is that as soon as Lindy like comes out of the place that she was trapped with, whoever the guy was that she killed, I think even at that moment, Ruby and the Doctor are clearly already a bit annoyed and disappointed that they've saved someone who is rotten, you know, instead of the guy who was trapped in there, Ricky September, that's right, it just came to me. Instead of saving him, who seemed like a decent guy, they managed to save the lesser, like the kind of a bit of a spoiled person. And they don't say it to her, but just in the way they're expressing themselves and being a bit awkward, I'm like, yeah, I kind of see it. So that was great. Anyway, that was Dot and Bubble. Next up, we're getting there, okay? Rogue. So this is a Bridgerton reference episode, is what I understand. Now, I haven't seen Bridgerton. I don't know anything about it. I guess I know some things about it. It's like British or something, and it's about dancing. I actually don't know. But I'm sure that probably also detrimented me a little. Is that even a word, detrimented? It was a bit detrimental to my experience, because I'm sure they're making a million references here that I don't understand. But overall, it's pretty good. Pretty decent episode. But there's like I guess this is also a more classic kind of, not classic Who, but like older kind of Doctor Who, like 2005 to 2010 or something, where you've got two like mini storylines going on. You've got Ruby's storyline, where she's like teaching this girl of this time, whatever year this was, I have no idea, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, one of those olden day times where there's sexism and stuff, and she's kind of teaching her to be more like assertive and, you know, have more modern feminist ideals and all that. That's a cute storyline. And I guess in the end we find out that that's actually not a girl, and it's an alien that's cosplaying as a girl. But that was one cute storyline. Then we have the Doctor and Rogue storyline, which was also cool, you know. I like them showing each other, they're two, like each showing their ship. And I like the cute scene where the Doctor is trapped like on the, I don't know what you call it, the sticky floor thing. And he's like triggering the music and he's like dancing to the music. And I'm like, this is great. I like this Doctor. This Doctor's great. So yeah, what else did I say? Ruby's fight scene using the earrings, that was really great. However, they use like a piano or like orchestral remix of Poker Face, and it felt so emotional, impactful. It felt like it was a really climactic, emotional moment in the whole season, but it wasn't. It was just like a fight that they were doing, and I was like, man, they should have saved this song for a more emotional moment. But yeah. Anyway, what else is there? I like the premise of aliens that feed off melodrama. True. And it also excuses moments of melodrama in this episode where, for instance, at the end of this episode where you've got the Doctor who's being very emotional and is kissing Rogue, and Rogue is like, don't worry, and he like gives his life up and everything. It feels very melodramatic, and usually I'd be like, this feels like it comes out of nowhere and it's happening suddenly, but I think it fits with the rest of the episode, which is all about like melodrama. So I like that element to it. What else is there? This feels like a very old 2005 Doctor Who episode where the companion and Doctor are going on their own, I said this already, little side characters' adventures. Rogue feels very Captain Jack-like. Obviously, everyone has anything anyone ever says about this episode is that, so not very original, but I did cross my mind when I was watching. I like the bird designs. The costuming looks really great. And Miller the Killer, you know, is a famous commenter and Discord member that I talk to a bunch. He pointed out that some of the designs look like chimera ants, and I was like, man, that is very true. And chimera ants are like a hybrid species that is in Hunter x Hunter. So yeah, but it very much, I agree with him. And I said, so what? I guess the one thing in this episode is I don't understand quite the ending, like what's happening, which is that, I mean, I understand the ending, I just don't understand what happens after this episode, I guess, which is that Rogue gets sent to like some alternate dimension or whatever, and I just don't understand, why isn't the Doctor searching for him? Like, why does he just like, I know he puts his like ring on or something and then he just like goes off to another adventure, and I'm like, I don't understand. Is like Rogue meant to find his own way back, or because we have a time machine are we just gonna like wait and go later? Like, why wouldn't you just like go search for him now? I just don't understand, basically. But yeah, so that was Rogue. Then we have the 2-part series finale, okay, episodes 7 and 8. We have first, The Legend of Ruby Sunday, which was the build-up episode. This up there, it's not quite up there with 73 Yards, which is like an all-timer Doctor Who episode, but this is definitely the second best episode of the season. Fantastic build-up. It's just a generally fantastic episode. It has a bunch of really just great characters that I love. Like, we get even just the first scene in this episode is like meeting all the characters in unit and meeting Rose again, or we're catching up with Rose again, I guess, and like catching up with, was it Melanie? It can't be Melanie. Wait, let me Google that. Melanie, Doctor, because that's like Aaron's wife, and oh my god, it actually is Melanie. Crazy. Anyway, Melanie and Kate, and we meet this new scientific advisor, and it's great. I love it a lot. God, what was I up to? The fantastic episode, a bunch of fine characters, fantastic build-up, the fantastic Sutekh reveal. That was so exciting in the way it's like naming all the gods. Like, there's a god of mischief and games and blah, blah, blah. And the way it builds up to like the mother and the father and the other of them all, Sutekh. And I'm like, man, what a cool reveal. And the Doctor's like freaking out and is like crying. And if only I'd seen the classic Who and I was also that excited, but fantastic. I love the scene. Oh, I guess the probably the highlight of this episode, beyond the reveal, which I think is fantastic at the end, or the build up of the reveal is really well done. I love the time window, the aesthetic, the mystery, even just the horror at the end where the Sutek cloud absorbs General Trudozzi or whatever his name was, Colonel Trudozzi, I think. And he's like, "Where are you?" And he's like, "I am in hell. He's seen me," or something. And I'm like, man, this is horrifying. So cool stuff. And when like the mother points like at the Doctor and Ruby in the time window, and you're like, whoa, can she like see them? Really cool, like sci-fi mystery. Everything is just fantastic. I love the time window. It's so cool. What a cool concept. Even like the Doctor like steps in and examines the time window and is like, and starts like cracking up and is like, this is rough. Like this is some bad work. And I'm like, it's just so funny and great. What else? I'm also glad that I should have probably written this in the finale stuff, but I'm glad that Mrs. Flood is going to be continuing basically into the next season. She is a really fun and creepy side character with a lot of mystery to her. So I'm excited that she wasn't kind of resolved in these 2 episodes. It would have been, I guess, interesting if they could have tied it together, but since they didn't, I am excited to see more of her basically. I don't know why I wrote that in this episode, but there you go. Anyway, that's generally the Legend of Ruby Sunday. It's a bunch of build-up. I'm sure I could come up with a bunch of other stuff, like talking to Susan Triad. Susan Triad is great. The Doctor thinking that it's Susan and like shaking her hand. Even like Sutek's final words, whereas like I bring Sutek's gift of death for your vile, incessant universe, and it's great. The teleprompter like changing and Susan hearing the voice in her head of like Sutek, and everything in this episode is fantastic. Like even just going back to Ruby's mother and bringing her mother to unit, and like that even adds tension. It's like, oh my god, what's going to happen here? Is she going to be okay? Is she going to get involved in all this? The reveal that like isn't near the beginning of the episode where the Doctor goes to unit and is like, who is Susan Triad? And they try and debug like who is Susan, or figure out who Susan Triad is. And then the Doctor's like, we have one other special girl today, Ruby Sunday. And she like puts her on the screen and Ruby's like all happy and everything. And I'm like, oh, this is so cute and great. The Legend of Ruby Sunday is a fantastic episode of Doctor Who. Despite like, even if there is no payoff, just on its own, it is a fantastic episode of just, I loved it so much. Anyway, and there's a lot more too, okay? But I'm not going to go into it. That's enough for now. Then we have episode 8, the finale, Empire of Death, which is the wrap up to this entire season. Now, I split this into the good and the bad, okay? So there's a lot of both, okay? The good. Sutek's plan is very cool, okay? Using the perception filter to create Susan Triads on every single planet that the TARDIS has stopped at, so that Susan can give the Sutek's gift of death for all the places that the Doctor has been. It feels incredibly personal. It just shows like the extent of like Sutek's hate for the Doctor, which is like, I'm personally going to destroy every single planet that you've ever been on in your entire life, okay? It's great. I love it. I agree. What a genius plan. Fantastic. Now that's some good payoff, okay, to a build-up, I think. The Remembered TARDIS is a really cool idea, and it's so cozy as well. Like when you go in, we've never seen, at least I never have, maybe in the old Who there are some TARDISes like this, but the TARDIS has always been so big. But just to see a tiny little cramped TARDIS, it makes me kind of want one of these like in the future, like for future Doctors, but it's cute. It's got a bunch of references to like old Who stuff. It's cozy. It's cute. It's a really cool sci-fi idea of like what is a memory of a time machine, and it's like a time machine is a memory of itself, and it's cool. I like it. I like the scene on the planet where the woman forgot that her baby died, and she's like, I think my daughter died, and I forgot. And the Doctor's like, I think she did. Sad, cute. I actually thought that this was going to be Ruby's mother, and it was going to be like a whole thing where it's like a time thing out of order where the mother's going to disappear and the Doctor has to pretend to be the mother with like a cloak and take Ruby, and it wasn't, but that's kind of what I thought. But it was not cute, I know I said cute. It was an emotional scene. I liked it a lot. I also really like the revelation at the end, which is that Ruby's mother is just a 16-year-old girl who came from an abusive home. And what is it? Wait, what have I actually written here? And I love the idea that she was just the general idea that she only became important because of like Sutek, some evolved crazy god, as well as the Doctor and Ruby and us, the audience, are placing so much importance on her. That's why she becomes so important to the narrative. And I said, like the quote here, she was important because we think she's important. It's how everything happens. We invest things with significance. It was cool. Okay. Doesn't make sense at all. I don't think we'll get to that in the bad elements to this episode, but as a high level concept, if you don't think too much into it, it can strike you. It can fit emotionally. It can fit somewhat, like if you think about it intellectually. I don't know. It was okay. I generally liked it quite a bit. Now there's 2 elements to this which are bad. One of them is how Sutek was not defeated, because I guess I like the defeated thing in the time vortex. That was cool. It was basically, I didn't like that they used the rope to get the upper hand on Sutek. Like they basically, Ruby like tricks him and they drop the thing, and then she like ties the rope on him and the Doctor's like pulling the rope, and I'm like, it's a bit weird. Like why doesn't Sutek like either cut the rope? Because I don't think it's like a magical god rope or anything. It's just like the weightless thing that he had with the glove, right? which was like charged by a battery and like was very physical. So I'm like, I feel like Sutek would destroy this. Or also like, why doesn't Sutek like charge at the Doctor and like kill him in this moment, or like use his green power or something? It's just a bit like jarring, where I'm like, this feels like a very easy way to defeat a very powerful enemy. So yeah, I don't know, I didn't like that. And the second thing, which I've hit on quite a lot here, which is that the explanation of Ruby's mother, like who she is, I generally like it, but it's incredibly tough, maybe impossible to wrap your head around. And it probably just doesn't make much plot sense at all. Like, why does it snow is one thing that's like completely unanswered. Now, maybe that will carry into the next season. I feel like it surely will, especially with the Mrs. Flood thing at the end of this episode also snowing when she's given that speech at the end on the roof. Why did Maestro say that Ruby has a power akin to the oldest one, or the one who is like they said there's like a hidden song inside her soul, and like basically why is the moment where she was born so important? And like I guess even the answer of like the mother is like pointing at a sign is a bit weird, and it's like, is that true? Is that actually what's happening? Or is that like a change because of Sutek's mental powers? I don't know, it's a bit like, I don't think you can, I think there probably isn't a good way to like rationalize all this together, which is a little bit like the disappointing element to this mystery. But other than the wrap up, I think everything else in this episode was genuinely really good. But yeah, let me see. Actual miscellaneous notes here. I said, oh, this is kind of interesting, which is that at the end of Legend of Ruby Sunday, Susan Triad, I guess Sutek speaking through Susan Triad, says, "For you and all of your tiny, vile, incessant universe." Excuse me. And then the next episode, Empire of Death, it opens with the same scene, but instead of saying, "For you and all your tiny, vile, incessant universe," she says, "For you and all of this tiny, vile, incessant universe." And I'm like, huh, they like reshoot the scene or something? Like, why did they? It's the exact same scene, but just with different dialogue. And I was like, it's a bit weird. Anyway, the Sutek theme is cool. There's like chanting. I can't really sing it, but it's cool music. The fake out Mrs. Flood death was really cool. I was like, oh my God, they actually killed her. And she's like, oh, I had so many great plans. And I was like, oh, Sutek playing with the TARDIS. Oh yeah, he's like revolving the TARDIS in his hands, like when he's grabbing it in the time window. That was really cool. There's great Sutek dialogue. And the one example I have is when he's like, I think he's talking about like, I'm going to destroy everything. And I've sent Sutek's dust everywhere. And he's like, and I find that good. And I was like, man, that's very Sutek. I like that a lot. I like the TARDIS that's held together with wishes and luck and hope and everything. That was cute. And oh, then I said like, I guess I kind of talked about this in the 73 yards thing, but I said, so the perception filter line that is stated in this, because they bring up the 73 yards thing and they say that the TARDIS's perception filter is like slightly less than 73 yards. So if you were technically 73 yards away from the TARDIS's perception filter might not be working on you, basically. And I guess my interpretation was that it might just be some character thing about how in 73 yards, people would walk 73 yards away from Ruby, which put them just outside the TARDIS's perception filter, then, or which would be, I guess, that woman's perception filter, or even her perception filter, like Ruby's. Then they would turn around and see Ruby, like the true Ruby, unaffected by the perception filter, and then they would run away. So it might be hinting at Ruby feeling that if someone gets a true look at her, then they're going to abandon her, just like her mother did. I guess that's like maybe how you could tie this into 73 yards. I don't know. So yeah. Anyway, that was Doctor Who. A fantastic return to form. I'm very excited for the next season. I guess the Christmas special and then the next season. All right, I'm going to drink some water. Jesus Christ. All right, next up we have Shogun, which is a TV show. It's 10 episodes long, and I watched it from the 25th to the 29th of June, and this was selected based on the wheel last month. It's a 5 out of 5. What can I say? Okay, so initially, it was an absolute struggle to get into this episode, okay? Oh, the first episode of the show, I guess. It's over an hour long. It's just a big investment. I know there's going to be a million characters, a million names, a million locations. I know it's going to be in Japanese, and I'm going to have to like read subtitles and everything. And I don't really have like a big investment in like exploring this element of like Japanese culture and society at this like time period. I just finished Dororo, where I'm like, it's in a similar time period. I'm like, oh, I'm going to tread this territory again. It was a big struggle to get into this, basically. But I'm very glad I did, because this was a very, very good show with good characters. And it's so great. Like, there is also an element to, if I watch this again, I'd probably enjoy it even more, because there was like a lot of trying to keep track of who the names were. And at some point I didn't really know who anyone was. And it took me a while to figure out who the heir's mother was and like why she was important. And I think I still don't quite understand some elements about that, but generally really good. And I guess this is like, if you haven't seen Shogun yet and what can I even say here? I guess I heard a lot of good things about this. A lot of people were saying this was really good. I thought this was going to be very mainstream kind of good show, and something like The Mandalorian or something, where it's like it appeals to all audiences, like it's really good, like high quality production, blah blah blah. That's what I was kind of expecting. But I think this is legitimately a very good niche show, which I don't think appeals to a broad audience. Like even just the fact that it uses It's just Japanese, like it's in subtitles. The fact that there's so many different characters and locations and power dynamics to keep track of, like there's so many monologues and there's not much action, and like these things, it's a very niche show that I think I'm very glad that it's become very popular, because I think it is legitimately very good and doesn't try to appeal to a broad audience. So there's that in that regard. I really like this show. Basically, the characters, I said, are probably the best part of the show, and the best stuff in this entire season is probably the Blackthorn, who's the Englishman, the Anjin-sama, his household drama stuff with like Fuji-sama and Buntaro and Mariko-sama. Yeah, that stuff is so good. I like that a lot. What else is there? Oh, now I just have a list of like all the fantastic scenes. I haven't got too many notes for this. It's like I've got the scenes that I like, I've got the characters, which I can like briefly maybe talk about each of these characters, and then I have like a bunch of miscellaneous notes. But in terms of the scenes that really stand out, if you've seen Shogun, hopefully you can keep track of the names that I've used here. So Yabushige climbing the rope down to save Rodriguez. Great. That was like probably the scene that really sold me on the show. It's in episode 1. It's like maybe halfway through the episode or something. It's so cool. It's like you hate Yabushige at this point because he's like boiled one of Blackthorn's men alive, and he's kind of, I don't know, he is kind of abusing his power and blah, blah, blah. But then he has this moment where it's like honor, where he's like, I need to save this man. I need to be the one to do it. And I'm like, this is kind of interesting. I love that scene. The first interaction of Buntaro and Blackthorn in his house. Oh yeah, the drinking and slurping contest, where it's like they're having a nice happy life with Mariko and Fuji, and then they find out that Buntaro is gonna live here as well, and it's like, oh man. And yeah, their first interaction, getting drunk and stuff, it was really great. And like, it's like a, what do you call it? Like a dick measuring contest, where it's like who's gonna give up the drinking first, and it's great. Buntaro. Oh, then we have the after this drinking contest where Buntaro is basically leaving, incredibly drunk, and Blackthorn is angry at him because he like obviously beat up his wife Mariko, and it's like. This scene doesn't go where you expect. You expect this to be like a big confrontation where like Buntaro is going to get mad at like Blackthorn who's yelling at him and they're going to fight or something. And maybe Buntaro is going to win because he's like a seasoned warrior. Or maybe Blackthorn's going to shoot him and kill him because he has a gun. But Buntaro apologizes. And he feels very sincere in his apology. And you know that he like doesn't want to apologize, but he feels honor bound in this. Like he has to do it because this is what a man does in this society. He apologizes. And he says like sake or something. And he's like blaming the alcohol. And it's like, man, this is a compelling scene. Yeah, it's like also, because it's not what you expect. You expect there to be a fight. It's kind of like, where do you put all your anger now? Now that this man has apologized, this man who beat his wife has apologized, what do you do? You can't kill him now. Like, he's not giving you a reason to harm him. Like, what do you do? Where do you put all the anger? It was a great, fantastic scene. What else is there? The scene where Blackthorn realizes that they killed his gardener, and they say like, or he says, the bird meant nothing to me. And then they reply like, your words gave it meaning. And I'm like, man. Then you've got the landslide that killed Toranaga's army. So men are just, basically it just shows that like freak accidents can happen. Like men are just people, and even if you think you're on top of the world and you're doing all this political like maneuvering, acts of nature can just happen and wipe you out. And I was like, man. Toranaga-sama, his son slipping on a rock and dying because he was trying to find the beauty in a fierce battle. Where is the beauty in this? That's a quote I'm doing. Where is the beauty in this? Making Hiromatsu go through with his suicide, and then Toranaga trying his hardest not to cry after he kills himself was really good. Now, firstly, the acting in this is really cool, where the camera's like focusing on his face, and he's like, his face is like twitching, and he's trying not to cry so hard because obviously he's like the head of the clan and he can't cry in front of his men and everything. But clearly this has affected him, and it's his fault because he like told him that he has to kill himself or go away or whatever. But then it kind of gets a little bit undermined because we find out this was like all part of their plan and they were like working together, and I don't know. But the scene before the reveal was really good. After the reveal, still pretty good. Then there's Buntaro trying to do the tea pouring thing that like, I don't really understand this. It's some cultural thing, which I think women do in this society mainly. But he's trying to like create the tea, and then he offers Mariko the death that she's been wishing for every day. But then Mariko denies him, saying that she'd rather live 1,000 more years than die with him today. And then there's like, she leaves, and Buntaro, the like honorable, manly man who is like the toxic masculinity in this society, he cries and he's like breaking down, and it's like he's beat his wife. He's a bad person, but man, do I feel bad for him when he's crying by himself here because his wife just told him that she'd rather suffer 1,000 years more than die next to him. And so yeah, it was really affecting. I like that a lot. Then we have the stuff in Osaka Castle. So like Mariko trying to leave and just seeing, it's just so cool. It's like the build up of like, she's going to step forward. Are they going to kill her? Is someone going to like shoot her with arrows from the sky? And it's just so, the tension and stuff. Fantastic scene. Mariko about to kill herself, where it's like you have the shutters closed and Blackthorn's got the sword up, and you're like, I actually legitimately thought she was going to kill herself. And I was like, man, don't do it, Mariko. You have so much to live for. So yeah, I love it. What else? Fuji and this is so after Mariko dies, Fuji-sama and Blackthorn are sitting in their house together. I think actually it's the image here in this backdrop here where they just have this moment where they're like, it's not the same. And it's like, usually it would be the three of them here all together because obviously Mariko is the translator. And it's just like, it's so quiet and it's like raining and they have a quiet moment where they're just sitting there alone without Mariko. And it's like, man, this is, emotional stuff, I liked it a lot. Then we have the final standout scene here, which is a rare, honest conversation between Toranaga-sama and Yubashige, is that right? Yabashige, the man marked for death. So it's basically these two that are talking, and for once, Toranaga is being honest because he knows that this man is going to die and he's like bound to kill him. He has to, like honor bound to kill him. And it's like we see the hypothetical future victory that apparently, according to Toranaga, if he's to be believed, is going to lead to a great era of peace. And then you're left with the question of like, will this happen? Is Toranaga lying to himself even? Yeah, fantastic. I just love the candidness of this conversation as well as seeing the hypothetical scene. It was just so cool to see it. Like a bloodless battle which has already been won because of the sacrifice that Mariko made, It's so cool. Fantastic show, fantastic scenes, fantastic acting, fantastic characters, everything, production, really great. Anyway, my next few final notes here, I said, at times this feels similar to Black Sails. Now I couldn't quite articulate why. Obviously we've got the aesthetic similarities because it's set in a very similar time period, if not the same time period, just in a different area. Like we opened with a ship, there's a lot of like sailing, you got an Englishman as the main character with a funny accent. It's like aesthetically pretty similar to Black Sails, but I think there's more to it than that. There are a lot of monologues. There are very interesting characters. I don't quite know how to describe this, but if I was to pick one show that it feels kind of reminiscent of, it would be Black Sails, I guess, which is high praise for sure because I love Black Sails. Anyway, it's initially, this is like a thing I tweeted about, but it's initially pretty jarring and funny. The fact that half of the show is or the majority of the show is spoken in Japanese. But whenever Blackthorn speaks, or anyone basically, whenever they're speaking English in this show, we're meant to interpret it as them actually speaking Portuguese, and they're just speaking English for the sake of the audience. Like, it's just a thing to make it easier for the audience. It's so weird. Like, that half of the show is authentic, and when they're speaking Japanese, we hear them speak Japanese. It's not like they're speaking English, and we have to assume and pretend they're speaking Japanese. But then the other half is like, why don't they just speak Portuguese? That is weird. It's weird to me, I don't like it. They should have made it Portuguese, but you know what? Whatever. Then I have my one... I've said so many good things about the show, so please let me say one bad thing about this, which is that I said episode 6 was a rough episode because we got introduced to the woman who is the mother of the heir of basically the most important person in all of Japan basically at this point, because she's the mother of the heir. Firstly, I didn't recognize her. I was like, I don't quite know what's going on here. There were a lot of names and titles and I was a bit confused. I know she was friends with Mariko. We get like a flashback and I didn't quite understand the flashback. It was a bit hard to keep track of like who is who, and then because they're like both younger and everything. I still don't quite understand her motives. Like she was talking about I guess someone talked about how she hates Toranaga-sama, but I think she also hated Mariko or something, but maybe she like loved her at the same time. It was a bit confusing basically. And episode 6 was kind of like her episode, and it like, I don't know, it was a bit, I wasn't quite aware of exactly what was going on, which was a bit of a disappointment. So yeah, maybe if I rewatch now, I'd understand it more, but back then I didn't. Oh boy. Now we have a list of characters. There's not much to say. Fuji-sama, love the scene where she pulled the gun. That was also great. It's sad that she doesn't stay with Blackthorn at the end, but I understand it. That was really good. Buntaro, also Blackthorn has a weird accent. Sorry, not Fuji-sama, Blackthorn. It's weird. It's like, clearly Blackthorn's accent is fake. Like, no one speaks like this. Unless the actor does, and sorry, my apologies, but I'm like 99.9% sure that it's a fake accent. I just don't understand why. Like, why wouldn't you just speak with your normal voice? I like it. It's cool. I like it. It's a weird accent. It's just not grounded, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, who else is there? Buntaro is great. Toranaga-sama is great. Yabashige, like in Mariko. Hiromatsu is also great. Ishido, compelling villain, or compelling, like, slimy kind of behind the scenes. I don't know, kind of cool. Yubashige's nephew, I said his name is Omi, apparently. He's great. He's like the clever one under Yabashige. Toranaga's son, he's pretty funny. I guess he dies to a rock. He's very incompetent throughout the entire show. It's kind of cool. I like the translator guy, the religious translator guy with the hat thing or whatever. No, he doesn't have a hat. He like shaved his hair. And for some reason, I think that's a hat. Rodriguez, immediately I loved Rodriguez the first time we saw him. He's like swearing, he's like speaking English, he's like running fast and stuff and like being like, come on, Anjin-sama, come here. It's great, love him. And the brothel owner lady was really cool. She's clearly smarter than she lets on, and I think she might be the only person who was like aware of Toranaga. Like his plans were already still in motion when everyone thought he was devastated by the death of his son or something. It was great. She's great as well. Anyway, bunch of great characters. All right, then we have a bunch of miscellaneous notes. So sailing the ship in the storm in episode 1 looked fantastic. That is true. An insane amount of water. I don't know how they filmed something like that. It was great. We loved it. Translations are also interesting in the show for a few reasons. Well, I guess there is one reason they're interesting. One is that generally how it goes is that Blackthorn, the Englishman, he'll say something in English. Then it's going to be translated into Japanese. But the subtitles will say something slightly different to what Blackthorn said. It'll use like a shorter or like more condensed language. And then it just makes me wonder, like, are we meant to pick up on the fact that the translator like didn't translate exactly what he said? Is this like a plot element of like mistranslation? Or is it just like saving time for like the show? And it's like, we don't want to translate. We don't want to literally like repeat what he just said because it'll like waste time. We already know what he said. So I don't know. It's a bit weird to me whenever that happened in the show. But yeah, there was actually also another note I have here about translations is the really cool, I think the first translation scene is probably the coolest one. Not the first one, sorry. The one in episode 2 where he's Blackthorn is talking to Toranaga-sama for the first time. Where it's like you start by doubting the translator, because the first translator you had, the random guy in episode 1, he basically lied the whole time and was mistranslating him. So when you see this new guy, the priest guy that's translating for Blackthorn, you think that he's going to be deceiving him. So you don't trust him. You don't quite believe that he's going to translate what he's asking him to translate. But then you start trusting him because you see like Mariko-sama in the background and Toranaga's like, we need you to authenticate that he's telling the truth. And I'm like, okay, I feel a little bit more at ease. Then you hear the translator quietly like translating and you see the words, I think, of him translating to Toranaga. And then you have Toranaga talking and then the translator talking. And then eventually you just have like the two characters who are the people in dialogue, one in Japanese, one in English, and they're literally, you're just flashing between them to the two of them, and you're not getting the translator anymore. It's great. A really cool way of doing translations. I thought that was fantastic. Then, an interesting like character thing, which is that you have Yabushige, who's like quite an incompetent, I mean, he is somewhat competent, but he's not as competent as Toranaga. Then you have Toranaga, who's incredibly competent. Yabushige has a nephew who is incredibly competent, and Toranaga has a son who is not very competent. And it is funny how, like, I think those two should swap places. Like, I think Yabushige's nephew is, like, the fantastic heir for Toranaga. And I think Toranaga's son is, like, the fantastic heir for Yabushige. So, take from that what you will, but I thought that was a funny swap you could do, okay? What else? Toranaga taking 9 strikes to get the guy's head off in his first battle. That was a cool little backstory. I also like in that episode where we hear that backstory, we get, like, when Toranaga is, like, struggling mentally a little bit, he, like, flashes back to that moment. And it's, like, his, like, one of the things he's ashamed of in his life. So that was kind of cool. The show does environmental storytelling very well. When things take a bad turn, it begins raining and storming. True. Then there's one thing I don't quite understand. Maybe on a rewatch I would, or maybe if I like watch reaction videos. I guess I also haven't seen reactions to this besides like a few moments where I was like, oh, what did Blindway think about this moment, you know? But in the final episode, we get flash forwards or like metaphorical flash forwards or something. We don't actually know if it's literal, of Blackthorn having grandchildren. And I was like, I don't really understand where this takes place. It was cool. I don't know. Maybe there's some thematic symbolism. I don't know. And finally, I like the one of the final plot elements, which is that the Portuguese church priest guy who was like the translator for Blackthorn, okay, every now and then, because of his like friendship with Mariko-sama, he basically lets, what is the actual, I don't remember the plot details, but basically he is integral and he lets like Blackthorn leave with his life and he like destroys the ship. And it's kind of like a very hopeful thing of like, maybe one day all of humanity will come together. Like this Japanese lady Mariko, this Portuguese Christian and the translator guy, and Blackthorn the Englishman. And it's like they put all their differences aside, or at least the Portuguese guys put his difference aside for the sake of Mariko-sama. And it's like, oh, maybe in the future, you know, humanity might all come together and stop fighting. So anyway, that was Shogun. Fantastic show. Next up, we have Mary and Max. So this is a 2009 movie. It's 1 hour and 20 minutes long, and I watched it on the 30th of June. So let's see. All right, so generally, this is a great movie. Okay, this is a 4 out of 5. It got to me emotionally quite a few times, which is fantastic. The one drawback, like why this wouldn't be like a 5 out of 5, is firstly, I'm not really that much of a fan of the aesthetic. I don't really like stop motion stuff, but you know, it looked pretty good for the most part. The biggest drawbacks are twofold, which are the comedy. You know, I think this would have benefited from being a little bit more serious in its tone and kind of the little character quirks and stuff. I don't know. I think it would have been a bit better if it was a bit more serious. But the biggest drawback by far is the grossness. Like there's like farting and I don't know, like the idea of like not sour, condensed milk or something. Like I don't know. It's just like a very gross movie. I don't like it. But yeah, and I also talked about this in the Doctor Who section. Grossness can kind of really sour me on something, and this was a bit too gross for me. But generally, the emotional elements strike really hard. And one of those elements is the main theme, which I did look up afterwards. And apparently it's like an existing song that they used for this movie. It's like some classical song or something. But the movie basically opens with this theme, and it's so immediately, you know that the movie is going to be an emotional one. Like it telegraphs to you, like, this is going to be incredibly emotional. Can't you hear this music? It's like, it's so great. And the interesting thing is that you don't even need any context for the rest of the movie to just know how emotional this theme is going to be. But generally the theme is just so good. It's a fantastic theme. But one drawback, I guess, is that later on in the movie, and I think they do this a few times, which is that they start playing the emotional theme, and I'm like getting emotional. I'm like, oh my God, this is like the theme when Mary was like a kid, and oh my gosh. But then they like cut it quickly. Like they kind of play the beginning for like a few seconds, and then they're like, or not a few seconds, maybe like 20 seconds, and then it like teeters off, and I'm like, oh, that was a bit quick. And the one example I have is that after Mary's about to commit suicide and the neighbor like comes and saves her life accidentally, then Max gets a letter. Oh no, Max is like beginning to type a letter about people being imperfect, and the music is like playing, but while he's like writing the letter, the music cuts out, like kind of fades away, and I'm like, I think we should have kept this music a bit longer to like feel the emotions of what Max is saying here. But I don't know, it was a bit weird. Generally, great. Music, great. Of the two characters, I think Max's story is generally more engaging, but I think that Mary's story I was way more emotionally invested in. Now, when it comes to Mary, I basically felt incredibly sad for her for the majority of this movie, because it's one of those stories where you have like an innocent child who just is going through tough, bad times, and they don't have a supportive environment around them. Like there's no one they can go to that is a very kind, loving person, you know? Like her parents, I guess her parents aren't the greatest, and it's just so sad. And the example I have here is that you've got like the teacher who, she's at school and the teacher's like, you need to smile more, which is like such a cruel thing to say to someone. And her mum she goes home, and her mum, who is not very supportive, like she draws lipstick on her. Or like when she goes to school and the bully is like bullying her for having like a pooped colored birthmark, and no one really does anything to like help her there. And Mary wishing that she could peel it off with a band-aid. Like these are all just sad things that a child, like there's no one around her to support her to go through these things. It's just so sad. And I think this also ties in with like the final line in this movie, which I think is on screen. And they're talking about how, or they say, God gave us relatives. Thank God we can choose our friends. And it's like, oh, it's cute. You know, Mary found the supportive environment through Max, and, you know, and their long distance relationship. So it was great. Oh wait, also when I say relationship, I mean like, you know, friendship. Okay. Anyway, then I said, man, out of nowhere, the movie got to me. This is probably the best scene in the movie, or the one that got to me the most emotionally, which is Mary basically, she has her surgery to get rid of her birthmark. And the next scene, the guy that she has a crush on she comes up to her, and she's kind of happy about it. And he says that she has dog poop on her shoe. And the next scene after that, like we then cut immediately from there, and Mary is crying in her room. And it's like, man, this is sad. Like she's still the same, like she had the surgery, she got rid of the thing that she thought was her problem, but she's still the same child, the same person she was as when she was a child, and she hasn't changed. And it's sad. It's like, man, yeah, there's still no love in her life. I don't know. It was just, I don't know why it even got to me so emotional. I guess they're probably playing the theme song as well. It's really great. The suicide attempt was also incredibly evocative. Like it's just so sad to think about how you see. I also don't, I think I hope I wrote about this here. Did I say it? Yeah, I said like scenes like the suicide scene, and even just seeing like Mary crying about like say the guy she has a crush on saying that there's like dog poop on her shoe. These are so emotional because you get invested in the very small details of her character when she was a child. Like you see her from like childhood to adulthood. Like when Mary goes through something sad later on, like almost committing suicide, you think back to the little innocent girl who didn't quite know how the world worked, and it's just so sad to see how her life ended up, you know? I wish I could articulate this better, but that's just generally what I thought. And I guess also that kind of applies to the theme as well. Like you hear the theme, it's the first thing you hear in the movie, and you kind of associate that theme with like the innocence of like the quirky and like the quirky and innocent life that Mary had when she was younger. And you kind of tie that theme to that moment in time. So when you hear it later on, like when she's committing suicide or afterwards or whatever, and when the neighbor saves her, you kind of think back to when Mary was younger, and you're like, man, to see how far this like young girl has come in the tragedy of her life, it's just, yeah, it's so sad. Like I wrote here, I said, when you see Mary when she's older and it plays the same emotional theme that the movie opened with, it reminds you of when she was younger and the quirky life she lives, when she wasn't aware of the cruelty and sadness in the world. It just hits you so emotionally. So yeah. Anyway, what was I saying? The suicide attempt being stopped by the neighbor. I'm crying just thinking about the poor little girl's life ending up like this. And she was pregnant too. So sad. And then Mary seeing how much that Max meant to her, that she meant to Max after she visits his house and sees all the things that he kept. And he's dead. Emotional stuff. Now, beyond this, all the emotional stuff, which I think is really fantastic, you've also got the whole element to this movie, which is exploring a character with autism, or like explaining autism to a more general audience, I guess. Now, personally, I'm not quite, like, I don't have any particular interest in this element. Like, I think it's an interesting portrayal, but I don't know. I wasn't seeking this out. I'm like, oh, I wonder what it's like to be autistic, you know? I don't know, it was fine. I thought it was mildly interesting, but I did like the scene where you've got Mary, who's like all excited, and she's been doing her research, and she's gonna like come up with a cure for Asperger's, and she sends it to Max, and we as the audience, and Max as well, we know that he doesn't want to be cured because he sees it as part of his identity. I thought that was an interesting exploration, I guess, of this Asperger's autism element to the movie, so I like that. But yeah, that's Mary and Max. I don't have too much to say. Just very emotional, I guess, and very personal. Not personal in that like I could relate to any of this, but like it's just emotional generally. Really great. Oh, my last note, I said surprising that I could watch this movie in 1080p on YouTube for some reason. Because generally when I rent stuff on YouTube, it like limits me to 480p because I've got like I'm using Firefox and you can record your screen and they get mad at that. Not that I was recording my screen, but the fact that you even potentially can do it makes them limited to 480p for some reason. But anyway, so we're in HQ. So how exciting, HD. Anyway, finally. We have The Sound of Metal. So this is a movie, 2 hours long, and I watched it on the 30th of June. And this is a 5 out of 5. This was a fantastic movie. So this was recommended to me by Kath a very long time ago. Not very long, I guess a few months ago maybe. And I kept putting it off, and it managed to win the spinning wheel last month. So here it is, I'm watching it. And it was, I didn't expect it to be this good, okay? I knew that it was about drumming or something, and I thought it was a musical for some reason, but no, it's just a really good, engaging movie with really good acting, great characters, great moments, fantastic. But let's see, what did I say? I said, in my overall thoughts, I said, it's a movie about going deaf that focuses on addiction to a certain lifestyle rather than finding a path to treatment. That was kind of interesting because I didn't know anything about this movie going into it. You got the first scene, his like hearing is going bad, and I'm like, oh, okay, is this movie going to be about like following a guy who's in a band and like what life is like when his hearing goes a little bit worse and it's going to like ruin his career or something? That's like one path I thought the movie was going on. Then he loses his hearing and we're like spending a little bit of time with the doctors and specialists and stuff. And it's like, oh, okay, is this going to be like a hopeful movie about like a man trying to collect enough money to get a cochlear implant so that he can hear again? I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's going to be interesting. But then no, then I thought, okay, we're going to go to like the other route, which is like, okay, he's going to learn to be accepting of his deafness and we're going to be like a pro-deaf movie. And it's like, oh my God, deafness is great. But no, it wasn't that either. It was more a character thing about like this man who is addicted to a certain lifestyle. And even in seeking treatment and finding a treatment to his current ailment, it doesn't solve the underlying issues that caused this initially. And that was kind of cool. I really like that. But yeah, let me see. What did I actually say? I said, is this movie portraying the idea of wanting hearing to be an addiction? I guess this was like, I was trying to figure out like thematically, what is this movie saying? And I think I said that the movie is more about Ruben himself, who can never sit still with his own thoughts because he's not accepting of who he himself is. He's desperately trying to cling to his old life, i.e. the symbolic addiction, but in doing so, he will push away everyone around him like an addict. So that's my general take on the movie. This movie also has a very interesting commentary when it comes to deafness. So on one hand, we're following Ruben's perspective as someone who doesn't know sign language. And we see that everyone around him is basically, despite not having hearing, they live incredibly fulfilling, happy lives. And it really does effectively portray that like deafness isn't something to be cured, but a mentality, like a social problem to solve basically. And they do show it. Like I could imagine a society like this, full of just, if the whole world was full of deaf people, if they lived like this little commune does, you can see why like it probably isn't something to be cured. Like it can provide a benefit, of course. Like there is many benefits to additional senses, but it's not necessary to the human experience, you know? It was interesting in that regard. I like that a lot. Then I said, oh yeah, so that's like it's portraying the positive element to like deaf, not the positive like, oh my God, everyone should go deaf, but like the element to like deaf people are just like, they're like everyone else, you know, society is not built around them, which is why they struggle. They're just like a minority, not like a disability or whatever. I guess they are technically a disability because it's like you don't have a certain ability that other people do, but it's like, it's not a life-threatening thing. I don't know what to say. Basically, that's the positive side of the movie about like deafness. Then on the other hand, you also have, which is I think kind of interesting, the kind of confrontational, like standoffish, defensive guy who is in charge of this deaf community, where like initially when Ruben comes in and Ruben's like, oh, you know, I want to get money for the cochlear implant, he kind of gets a bit defensive and is like, we don't cure things here. Like we're out integrating and living, like we don't believe that deafness is like a thing to cure or whatever. And he kind of like gets a bit defensive, and it like kind of, as the audience, it like pushes me away from him. Like, I guess this guy who isn't really that empathetic or kind, and he's just like kind of got his own community and is going to be defensive of it. So I didn't quite like that. I liked it. I just thought it was like repelled me a bit from that character. Then I guess there's also the scene like later on where like Ruben is like fixing the roof and he's like hammering it, and the guy like brings him in his office like, what are you doing? There's nothing that needs to be fixed here. And I'm like, oh, okay, this guy's a bit confrontational. Then we get I thought personally this was going to be like he was like a very pro-deaf person. It's like, we need nothing fixed, okay? There's nothing to do with, like, deafness is perfectly fine and we like it. And I enjoyed being deaf. I'd rather be deaf than like have hearing or whatever. That's kind of what I was interpreting his character as. But then later on, we get the reveal that even that guy, the owner of this place, or the guy in charge, even he struggles with his situation of being deaf. And it doesn't come easy to him. He's like, he has this moment where, in probably the best scene in this entire movie, where the guy in charge is like, he has a conversation with Ruben, where Ruben has revealed that he had a surgery. And at the end of that conversation, Ruben's like, can I stay? And the guy reveals that like, just seeing you, a person who has managed to be cured, has like managed to get the money and everything to get this cochlear implant. It's like a constant reminder that like, that we can't hear, and like we're different from everyone else. And it's like, it just points out that the guy in charge, he still struggles. Like, it's not easy. It's not like he isn't the person that I thought he was, which is like a very pro-deaf person who's very happy with who he is. It's like he struggles, and he kind of, in the back of his mind, he tries to push it away, but he still wants to be able to hear. Yeah, and it's the best scene in the movie. It's so incredibly acted. Like, even when Ruben steps away and the guy is basically trying not to cry, it's fantastic. So yeah, let me see. Did I actually cover everything in that? I said we get the reveal that he struggles. It's interesting that even the guy who struggles with his beliefs that deafness isn't something to be cured. The conversation with Ruben revealing that he had surgeries affects him greatly, and he almost breaks down and Ruben leaves. It explains his sternness in the earlier interactions so well. I'm impressed by the movie. True. There's also an interesting portrayal of deafness to an audience who isn't deaf, which is that you have a scene in this movie where like everyone, basically the introductory scene where Ruben is being integrated into this new community. And it's like an Alcoholics Anonymous kind of like setting where it's like they're all sitting in a circle, all introducing themselves, and they're all like kind of talking to each other using sign language, and Ruben doesn't understand. And it's an interesting position to be in as a person who you can hear, where it like kind of puts you in the frame of like imagining if you were a person who couldn't hear or was deaf. Because I think I've poorly explained that, but like in a normal like society situation in our world, not in this little community where everyone is deaf, in a normal situation, if you were a deaf person, you would be the one in Ruben's shoes. You would be the person who wouldn't know what people are saying because they're speaking and they're not signing to you. They're speaking in their own language. They're using words, like audio words, and you can't hear them, and you kind of feel like the one left out. And the movie places you in that kind of position, but the inverse, where it's like the person who can hear or who knows how to speak, they can't understand all the deaf people around them who are speaking in their own language. They're using sign language. It's kind of interesting. And we get like a similar scene like that a bit later on where they're all at the dining table and they're all having dinner or lunch or something. And everyone's being casual and they're all like laughing and they're like hitting each other on the shoulders and like having conversations in sign language. And Ruben is like completely left out because he just can't understand their language. And it would be like a similar thing inverted. Like imagine a deaf person sitting at a table with a bunch of people happy and like laughing and yelling and like sharing stories and stuff, and you can't understand them because you don't speak their language anymore. Yeah, really cool. I like that a lot. Anyway, the final scene with complete silence as he takes in life. I guess just skipping all the way to the end here, I guess. The final scene is a little bit jarring. I think it kind of works, but it's a little bit weird. Now, I think, like I wrote here that I said, I think the movie works on a character level, or whatever level you'd refer to that, maybe thematic, character, whatever it is, where Ruben solves his hearing problem Ruben does solve the hearing problem by having the surgery. He can hear again, but he doesn't solve the problem within himself. Even just the fact that he like rushes to go get the cochlear implant without considering that maybe it's not going to be as perfect as he wants. And basically the whole experience was a little bit disappointing because he was hoping to get his hearing perfectly back, but it all sounds robotic and not quite what he was expecting. Even that like feeds into his like addicted, like acting without thinking, like trying to get back to his old life, like being addicted to it without thinking it through. It all feeds into like his character. But on the other hand, like the character level, I think works really well. The other hand is like the thematic and moral level, where the movie is kind of saying that people should learn to value the quiet moments in life. So this is an interesting theme. I do like it. And it is also like, I should note that like for a few seconds when there is the silent scene and he's looking around and he's seeing like the kid on the skateboard and the people just walking in the distance, I kind of get it. I'm like, I understand. I'm kind of feeling the appeal of like turning off the noise and just living in the moment in your quiet, like little moment sitting on the bench without any sound. I get the appeal. But at the same time, you only get this appeal of the silence, which would be symbolic of the deafness, I guess, in this movie. You only get that appeal because the technology isn't perfect. He's having an issue in that moment, hearing the bells and all the loud people around him, because the cochlear implant that he got was like tinny and robot-y, and it just doesn't sound quite right, and it wasn't what he was expecting. I don't think, if he were to have his hearing perfectly fixed by the cochlear implant, I don't think the conclusion of the movie would have been the same, because I don't think he would have been bothered by all the sounds around him. And it like puts the movie in this weird like moral thematic conclusion where it's like, what is the message here? Is it that like you shouldn't think down on deafness, because deafness is like you can derive some of the greatest joys from like being deaf, and being deaf is just like another element to life? Or is the takeaway like, because technology is imperfect, sometimes shutting out the technology is like bad, is good? I don't really, I basically just I wish that there was more clarity in like, you know what I wish we got to the end of the movie and slowly over time the cochlear implant like got like, initially it was a bit rough and like it was very tinny and robotic, and over time he got used to it, and in this final scene it was like perfect and he had normal hearing. But then even in that moment, then he would kind of have the moment of realization where it's like, you know what, my whole journey to get to this point, I've struggled. I had the implant. It wasn't perfect, but here I am in this moment. I got my hearing back, but even now I'd like to like turn it off or something and have like a moment of silence. I guess I could appreciate that more, but even then, I don't know, it's a bit weird. Yeah, I don't have any conclusions here. It's just, it felt a little bit weird to me, the ending, but overall, still fantastic movie. Everything else besides the ending, I think was fantastic stuff. Incredibly engaging. The acting was really great. Like Ruben is fantastic. I have some examples here. Just even right at the beginning when he's doing the sound testing with the specialist and he's inside like the soundproof booth, and you can see like slowly as he's like, the guy is telling him to repeat the words, he's slowly being defeated. He's like, he just gives up at some point. It's like, I can't hear. And it's so depressing. So that was great acting. The frustration when Lou is on the phone, and like this is first when Ruben is like losing his hearing, and he's just so frustrated because he can't hear what Lou is saying, and it's like the frustration is really good acting. I like the sadness when he's alone for the first time, when Lou gets in the car and drives away. It's like, man, like he probably hasn't been alone for quite a long time, and it is so sad. Yeah. And obviously the deaf guy, it's a bunch of deaf guys, but the main deaf guy, the guy in charge of this community, is really interesting. Like he's doing a kind service to these people. He's built a community of deaf people around him so that they can all live like happy lives and they're in like little society. And that's an unambiguously kind, nice thing to do, a kind service. But he himself is not a particularly kind person. Most of the time, he just has like a blank expression on his face. He looks like he's about to like get angry at you or something. Like there's a lot of times, like even in the scene here on the screen, when they're having the conversation, Ruben and this guy in charge, there's a lot of times where Ruben will say something and then you cut to this guy's face and he's just like, he's like staring at you like blankly for like 5 seconds. And it's like, this is not a nice, kind person on the outside, but on the inside he is. It's really interesting. Really good acting is, I guess, what I would say. And maybe directing as well, whatever you would attribute that to. It was a great decision. Anyway, now we just have a few miscellaneous notes on this movie. The opening scene was cool, like where you're cutting to it's a cold open basically with an on-stage performance. Like the guy's just drumming and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Olivia Cooke is in this, which I was surprised because I also watched House of the Dragon episode like an hour before I watched this. And I was like, man, that's crazy. She was in House of the Dragon and here she is in this movie, like 4 years earlier, something like 5 years earlier. The scene where he's picking at his ear and stretching his jaw and is trying to get the sound to come back, my goodness, it was so relatable because I've had my ears being blocked because of like ear infections in the past, and that is the most like scary and frustrating thing where it's like you're tugging on your ear and nothing's coming back, you're like picking at it and you're like yawning and it's just not coming back and you're like, man, this is not good. And I felt the stress in his scene when he was going through that. Ruben, when he gets like the deafness at the beginning of the movie, he goes right back into drumming and I'm like, god damn it, I hate people like that where it's like they'll put their life in front of their health or whatever, like they'll want to pursue their like health should be above everything basically, and this guy did not prioritize his health. So crazy. There was a cute scene where he's like playing the drums by banging on the slide with the kid. That was really cute. I said the teacher is a perfect depiction of a cute primary school teacher. That is true. She was very cute. Man, it's a great feeling when he's starting to feel like he fits in and is having fun playing with the kids and competing to see who can do the alphabet the quickest. That was very true. And every time he goes into the private room with the computer, I'm nervous because he's like looking around on his shoulder and he's like, obviously someone's going to catch him at some point in this movie. And he does this like a few times and no one catches him. It never happens. I was like, wow. What a subversion. The trope is that whenever a character's looking over their shoulder and we repeat the scene later, eventually he's going to get caught, but he never did. So crazy. Anyway, that was The Sound of Metal, a fantastic movie. I recommend this to basically anyone. A really good movie. And then we have the 2024 rankings so far. So all the way at the top, we got a bunch of good stuff this month. We got Sound of Metal, 5 out of 5, really great. Shogun, right onto that, really great. Doctor Who, which, you know, maybe if I think about this in the future, maybe it'll move up to a 5 out of 5, but for now it's a 4 out of 5. Then we have Mary and Max, a really great movie. We got Black Lagoon, a pretty great anime. We got Pyramids of Mars in last place, 20th. Pretty good as well. Still, no 2 out of 5s. Crazy. Maybe next month. Probably next month, actually, now that I'm thinking about what's included next month. Anyway, now we're going to spin the wheel. So if you want to recommend me stuff to include in this wheel spin, go to eliteari.com and you can enter the thing you want me to watch. I'll approve it. If it gets approved, if it's also available in Australia, then it will be available on this spinning wheel that I do every month. And the chance of something being selected is more likely if it's short and less likely if it's long. And basically, I'm going to keep choosing things until the total number of things I choose, the runtime for them, is greater than 4 hours. So let's get to it, I guess. Wait, let me get the roulette number of hours up. Okay, let's go. Oh boy. Okay. I don't even know what I hope at this point. I haven't even gone through them. There's so many things recommended. I just hope it's not something long, okay? Because my goodness, it's a struggle to get through things. But my goodness, wouldn't it be crazy if One Piece was chosen? My god. Oh. Alright. Jackie Brown. I'm pretty sure that's a movie. Let's see how long that is. 2.5 hours. Okay, so we can spin again. Oh my god, it's funny how it starts on Mad Men every time. My goodness. I wonder if that increases or decreases the chance of Mad Men. Probably has no effect. Okay. So I'm looking up at my monitor. That's why I'm looking up at the moment. Oh boy. Oh. Ascendance of a Bookworm. Pretty sure that's an anime, right? Ascendance of a Bookworm. All right. 14 hours. So that's it for this month's digest. So yeah, I guess see you next month.